Part 1. She had always loved the sound of piano keys, even before she fully understood how music worked. In her small town, there was nothing fancy about life. Most people woke up, worked, came home, and repeated the same pattern every day. But she found something different in the soft echo of notes, something that made the world feel bigger than the streets she walked on. Her first piano wasn't even a real one. It was an old electronic keyboard someone had thrown away years ago. Half the keys didn't work, and some made a buzzing sound instead of music. But to her, it was still a treasure. Every afternoon, she sat with it, pressing the keys that still responded, trying to imagine how a real piano would feel under her fingers. Her family didn't say much about her interest. They were busy with their own struggles, bills, long shifts, unexpected expenses. Her hobby was seen as something harmless, something she would probably outgrow. And maybe that would have happened if she didn't feel such a strong connection every time she played a little melody. It wasn't just a pastime for her. It was something that made her feel calm, hopeful, and alive. At school, things were different. People talked, and they talked loudly. Whenever she mentioned music or piano, someone would laugh. Some students asked why she even tried when she didn't own a real instrument. Others told her it was a waste of time and that she should focus on things that could actually lead somewhere. They didn't say it to be cruel, at least not always. But the words still stung. Teachers weren't much better. They weren't mean, but they treated her dream like something temporary. Whenever she mentioned wanting to perform or learn more about music, she heard the same line said in different ways. It's good to have hobbies, but don't get distracted. Hobbies. The word followed her everywhere. It made her feel small, like her passion didn't matter. Even then, she didn't stop. At night, when the house grew quiet, she sat in her room with the old keyboard. She played softly, so no one would complain about the noise. She watched videos of pianists online and practiced until she could match some parts by ear. Most people her age were out with friends, watching movies, or scrolling through their phones. She was learning scales on a broken keyboard. The school year moved slowly, and with each month, she grew a little more confident in her playing. Not because others encouraged her, but because she could feel herself improving. She knew which patterns she messed up often. She knew which notes she had to strengthen. And she knew when she had finally mastered a piece. Those moments made her smile, even on days when school felt heavy. And one morning, everything shifted. During assembly, the school principal announced that there would be a talent event at the end of the month. Students could perform anything they wanted: singing, dancing, poetry, comedy. The hall buzzed with excitement, especially among students who loved being in the spotlight. She listened quietly, her heart beating faster. This was a chance. A small one, but still a chance. As she walked to her classroom afterward, she wondered if she should sign up. Part of her felt brave. After all, she had spent years practicing for moments that never came. But another part of her remembered the laughter, the comments, the way people shrugged at her dream. The thought of standing in front of the whole school made her stomach twist. During lunch, she heard a group of students talking about the event. They named people they thought would perform well and joked about who shouldn't even try. She quietly listened, waiting to hear her name, even though she didn't want to. And when she finally did hear it, the comment was exactly what she expected. "She'll probably play that toy keyboard of hers," someone said, laughing. "Yeah, maybe she'll play 3 keys and call it a song," another added. She walked away before she heard more. The comments weren't new, but hearing them when she was considering something big made them hit harder. That evening, she sat at her old keyboard longer than usual. She played the same melody again and again. Her fingers moved almost automatically, but her mind was full of questions. Was she brave enough? Was she good enough? Could she face the same laughter, but in a room full of people instead of just the hallway. She closed her eyes and tried to imagine herself sitting at a real piano, performing under bright lights, with people finally listening. Not judging, not mocking. Listening. The thought alone made her chest feel warm. The next day, she made a choice. She walked to the sign-up sheet taped outside the office. Her hand shook as she picked up the pen. Students passed by, some glancing curiously, some not caring at all. She wrote her name quickly and stepped back before she lost her nerve. Once she signed up, the news spread faster than she expected. By lunch, several students had already made comments. Some were surprised. Others were amused. Someone even asked her if she was being serious. She answered with a simple nod. No explanation. No argument. Inside, she was scared, but she also felt something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. For once, she wasn't letting fear make decisions for her. The days leading up to the event felt heavier than normal. Whispers followed her in the hallway. Students made jokes when she walked past. A few asked what song she would play, not because they cared, but because they wanted something to mock later. One afternoon, as she practiced near the window, she heard two teachers talking outside the room. They didn't realize she was listening. "I hope she doesn't get embarrassed," one said softly. "She's a gentle kid. Maybe we should encourage her to switch to something simpler," the other replied. "A poem, maybe. Or a short reading. Piano might be too much." She froze. Their words hit her harder than any joke from classmates. Students joked because they didn't understand her. But teachers' doubts felt different, more real, more serious. She waited until they walked away, then sat back down at the keyboard. For a moment, she couldn't move her hands. She felt small again, the same way she did when she first started being teased about her passion. But eventually, she placed her fingers on the keys and started practicing again. The melody sounded shaky at first, but with each repetition, it got clearer. She knew she wasn't perfect, but she also knew she was better than what people believed. When the night before the event came, she barely slept. She kept imagining herself on stage. She imagined the audience's eyes on her. She imagined making a mistake. She imagined freezing. But she also imagined playing the piece perfectly, losing herself in the music while everyone's doubts slowly faded. Before going to bed, she looked at her old keyboard and whispered a quiet promise to herself. Just try. Just once. Don't back out. She didn't want to prove people wrong. She simply wanted to show them that her dream wasn't just a hobby. It was something she carried in her heart. And now, for the first time, she would finally get to share that with a room full of people, even if they didn't believe in her yet. Part 2. The morning after she signed up for the event, the air at school felt different around her. She couldn't explain it, but she noticed the way people looked at her, some curious, some amused, and a few simply confused. She tried to ignore it, but the shift in attention followed her from class to class, like a quiet shadow. During the first break of the day, she overheard two students whispering near their lockers. They weren't trying to be loud, but the hallway was quiet enough for their voices to reach her. "Did you hear she's really going to play the piano?" one said. "On stage? In front of everyone? That's brave, or I don't know." "Something else," the other replied with a shrug. She walked past them with her eyes focused ahead, pretending she didn't hear a thing. But inside, her stomach tightened. Was it bravery? Or was she making a mistake that everyone would witness at the same time? During lunch, she sat at her usual spot near the window. She liked that corner because the sunlight made the table warm, and the noise of the cafeteria felt softer there. She opened her small notebook filled with scribbled music notes and short reminders, hoping it would distract her, but she couldn't fully focus. A group of students sat a few tables away, talking loudly about the event. She tried not to listen, but some words carried over. She's going to panic on stage. Watch. Why didn't she pick something easier? Everyone knows she doesn't even have a real piano at home. Maybe she thinks she's some musical star. The comments stung more sharply than she expected. Not because they were new, but because they came now, just when she needed courage the most. She closed her notebook and stared outside. A few leaves danced across the schoolyard, carried by a small breeze. She wished she could be like them, light, unbothered, floating without worrying about how others judged their path. But she wasn't a leaf. She was someone trying to do something that mattered to her. Even if others didn't understand why after school, she hurried home and went straight to her room. Her old keyboard waited for her, sitting stubbornly on the uneven table where it had lived for years. She touched the keys gently, almost like greeting an old friend. The first few notes she played came out messy, partly because she was tired, and partly because her mind was full of doubts. She paused, took a slow breath, and started again. This time the notes sounded clearer. She closed her eyes and let her hands follow the melody, letting herself sink into the music. For a moment, everything felt peaceful again. The hallway whispers didn't exist. The teacher's doubts didn't matter. All she had was the sound of her own playing. She practiced until her fingers felt stiff. When she finally stopped, the sky outside was turning dark. She looked at her reflection in the window, tired, worried, but still determined the next morning. She woke up earlier than usual. She wanted to practice before school, hoping it would calm her nerves. But her keyboard didn't cooperate. Several keys crackled, some didn't make a sound at all, and one stuck completely. She sighed, pressing it more gently, then harder, hoping it would work just one more time. But it didn't. The keyboard had reached its limit. For a moment, panic shot through her. The event was getting closer, and she needed every minute of practice she could get. She stared at the broken keys, feeling helpless. She sat on her bed and rubbed her hands together. She didn't have money to fix it, and buying a new one wasn't even an option. She had already stretched her time and effort far enough. This one obstacle felt like the universe telling her she wasn't meant to do this. But then she remembered why she had signed up. She wanted to show people that her passion wasn't a joke. She wanted to show herself that she could stand on a stage and not run away from what she loved. So instead of giving up, she made a new plan. She closed her eyes and practiced in her mind. She imagined the feel of the keys under her fingers, the shifts in melody, the timing of each section. She replayed the piece mentally, as if she were actually performing it. It wasn't the same as practicing on a real instrument, but it was better than letting fear win. School didn't get easier as the week went on. The whispers didn't stop. If anything, they got louder. People weren't trying to hurt her. They simply didn't understand. But misunderstandings still carried weight. One afternoon, during her free period, she sat in the music room. The school piano stood in the corner, polished and heavy, a complete contrast to the old keyboard she had at home. She rarely touched it because she didn't want to draw attention to herself. But today, she needed it. She waited until the room was empty before walking up to the piano. The lid lifted smoothly, and the keys looked bright under the overhead lights. Her fingers hovered above them, shaking slightly. She pressed a single note. The sound was soft but full. It felt real in a way her keyboard never could. She sat down, placed both hands on the keys, and began to play. At first, she was nervous. Her timing felt off, and she worried that someone might walk in. But as she continued, her hands relaxed, and the familiar melody took shape. It sounded different on a real piano, richer, deeper, fuller. She played the entire piece without stopping. When the final note drifted through the room, she felt tears sting her eyes. Not because she was sad, but because she finally heard the version of the song she had always imagined. She didn't realize someone had walked in until she heard a voice behind her. That was unexpected. She turned around quickly, startled. A teacher stood near the door. He wasn't one of her music teachers, just someone passing by. His expression held mild surprise, but also curiosity. She didn't know what to say, so she stayed quiet. "You're performing this at the event?" he asked. She nodded slowly. He looked at the piano, then at her. "Keep practicing," he said softly. It sounded good. Real good. It wasn't a dramatic compliment. It wasn't full of excitement or praise. But it was the first time someone at school said something supportive about her playing dot. It mattered. After he left, she stayed in the room a little longer, letting herself enjoy the moment before heading to her next class. The next few days passed with a mix of fear and excitement. She practiced whenever the music room was empty, always looking over her shoulder to make sure no one was watching. She didn't want more comments or questions. She just wanted to get better. One afternoon, she entered the room only to find 2 students already sitting inside. They weren't using the piano, but they were talking quietly. She hesitated at the door. She didn't want an audience, but she needed the practice. She walked in slowly and sat at the piano. The students looked at her, surprised. One raised an eyebrow, the other whispered something. She felt her chest tighten. She placed her fingers on the keys and started to play. Her hands were shaking at first. The notes weren't steady. She made 2 mistakes in the first few seconds. Her cheeks warmed with embarrassment. She almost stopped, but then she remembered the way the melody felt when she played alone, the way it pulled her in and made the world around her quiet. She closed her eyes and focused only on the music. Slowly, the nerves faded. The notes became clearer, stronger. The melody flowed again. When she finished, she didn't look up. She simply stood and gathered her things. As she reached the door, one of the students spoke. "Hey." That was actually nice. She paused, unsure how to respond. She nodded once and left. The comment wasn't much, but it was still more kindness than she usually heard. By the end of the week, she felt exhausted but determined. She still heard jokes in the hallways, still sensed doubts from teachers, still felt the pressure weighing on her. But she also felt something else growth. Every time she practiced, whether on a broken keyboard, a real piano, or even just in her mind, she became a little better, a little more confident. The night before the event, she practiced in the school music room one last time. She played her piece 3 times in a row, each one better than the last. When she finished, she touched the piano gently, like saying thank you. As she walked home, the streets were quiet. The air felt cool against her skin. She thought about everything she had gone through, every doubt, every whisper, every moment when she almost quit. But she didn't quit, and tomorrow she would finally step onto that stage. Not as someone people teased, not as someone with a broken keyboard, but as someone who refused to give up on something she loved. She wasn't sure what the audience would think. She wasn't sure how she would feel standing in front of so many people, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was ready to try. Part 3. The morning of the event arrived with a strange mix of excitement and tension in the air. She woke up before her alarm, staring at the ceiling for a moment as she tried to calm her racing thoughts. Today was the day she would step on stage. Today was the day everyone would finally listen. She sat on the edge of her bed and took a slow breath. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear alone, but from the weight of everything she had carried for so long. The doubts, the laughter, the quiet moments of practice in her room, the night she imagined playing in front of an audience that wasn't mocking her. She stood up and got ready. She kept her outfit simple. She didn't want bright colors or anything that made her stand out before she even touched the piano. She wanted the music to be the only thing people remembered. Her family wished her luck before she left, though they didn't fully understand why the event mattered so much to her. But she appreciated their gentle words and small smiles. Sometimes support didn't need to be loud to be meaningful. When she reached the school, the halls were buzzing. Students moved in groups, talking excitedly about who would perform what. Some carried props, others rehearsed lines or warmed up their voices. The atmosphere felt alive, filled with energy. As she walked through the hallway, a few students glanced at her with raised eyebrows. Some whispered softly, not bothering to hide their curiosity. She kept walking, ignoring everything around her. She didn't want to let their reactions get inside her head. Not today. In the backstage area of the auditorium, performers gathered in small clusters. She stayed in a corner, holding her small notebook with the handwritten music notes. She didn't need it anymore, but keeping it close gave her a strange sense of comfort, like holding a piece of her journey. A teacher in charge of the event walked around, checking the list of performances. When he got to her name, he looked up and nodded. "You're performing third," he said. Third. That meant she wouldn't have too much time to overthink everything. But she also couldn't ease into the moment by watching several performances before hers. She stood quietly, listening to the sounds coming from inside the auditorium. The audience was filling up. Chairs scraped lightly against the floor as people settled in. The low hum of conversation grew louder. Her heart beat fast. She pressed a hand gently on her chest as if she could slow it down. A few minutes later, the event began. The host greeted the audience, thanked everyone for coming, and introduced the first act, a group dance routine. From backstage, she could hear the music and the applause afterward. Then came the second act, someone reciting a poem. The voice echoed softly through the speakers. Her turn was next. A staff member signaled for her to get ready. She stepped forward, her legs feeling strangely light, almost disconnected from her body. The teacher overseeing the performers gave her a reassuring smile. "Just breathe. You're going to do fine." She nodded, though she wasn't sure she believed it. She gripped her notebook one last time before placing it on a nearby table. The host's voice came through the speakers. "Next, we have a piano performance. Please welcome our next participant." Her heart jumped. This was it. She stepped onto the stage slowly. The lights were bright, brighter than she expected, making it hard to see the faces in the audience clearly. But she could sense them, hundreds of eyes watching, waiting. She walked toward the piano at the center of the stage. It looked almost intimidating under the spotlight, its dark wood polished and smooth. She pulled the bench out gently and sat down, adjusting her posture. For a moment, she didn't move. She let her hands rest on her lap as she inhaled deeply. Her thoughts raced. What if she messed up? What if she forgot the notes? What if the audience laughed? What if everything she worked for ended with a mistake? She closed her eyes. She remembered the nights she played on her old keyboard, the countless times she practiced in silence when the keys refused to work. She remembered the melody that helped her breathe through difficult days. She placed her hands on the keys. The first note rang through the hall. It was soft, almost fragile, like a small whisper in a large space. But it carried emotion, her emotion. She continued playing, letting the melody guide her. At first, her hands trembled, but the longer she played, the more her nerves faded. Each note strengthened her confidence. The room grew quiet. The audience, which moments earlier had been full of chatter, settled into complete stillness. People leaned forward in their seats. Some tilted their heads, surprised by the softness and depth of her playing. Others watched with focused eyes, trying to understand how someone who had been dismissed for so long could produce something so beautiful. The music grew stronger. Her fingers moved gracefully, gliding across the keys with a mix of precision and emotion. She felt like she wasn't playing for the audience. She was playing for herself. For the younger version of her who practiced in a small room with a broken keyboard. For the girl who carried a dream, even when everyone else waved it off as unimportant. The melody shifted into a brighter section, filled with hope and a quiet sense of pride. The notes echoed in the hall, filling every corner. People who once doubted her now sat motionless. Teachers who thought her passion was nothing more than a distraction stared in awe. Students who laughed when she signed up felt something tighten in their chests, because what they were hearing wasn't just music. It was her. Story. Her courage. Her determination. Her heart. She reached the final part of the piece, a most emotional section. Her fingers moved faster now, but with control. Each note blended into the next, rising and falling like waves. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. She felt the room's energy shift. She felt the weight of their silence. Then came the last note. She held it for a moment, letting it linger in the air before gently lifting her fingers. The hall was so quiet she could hear the faint humming of the lights above. She sat still, unsure of what would happen next. Then the applause came. It started softly, as if the audience needed a second to process what they had just witnessed. Then it grew louder, much louder, until the entire hall was filled with claps that felt almost overwhelming. The sound washed over her. She blinked rapidly, trying to steady her breathing. Her hands shook again, but this time not from fear, from relief. She stood up slowly and bowed. The spotlight warmed her face as she glanced toward the audience. Though she couldn't see them clearly, she could feel the sincerity in their applause. As she walked off the stage, several teachers approached her backstage. Their expressions were nothing like before. "That was beautiful," one said softly. "You've been practicing a lot, haven't you?" Another added, "Impressed." She nodded shyly, still overwhelmed. Even students who had once mocked her now looked at her differently. Some murmured things like, "I didn't know she could play like that," or "That was really good." The tone wasn't mocking this time. It was genuine. She returned to her quiet corner backstage, her heart still beating fast, but in a calmer rhythm. She felt light, almost weightless. For the first time, she felt truly seen. She sat on a chair and looked at her hands. They had carried her dream for so long, and today they finally showed the world what she had kept hidden. The rest of the event continued, but she barely heard anything. Her mind kept replaying the moment she touched the keys, the silence in the room, the applause that followed. She knew that even if people forgot her performance in a few days, she wouldn't. This moment would stay with her. When the event ended and the audience began leaving, she walked out of the auditorium feeling lighter than when she entered. The sun outside felt warmer, the air softer. A few students stopped her in the hallway. "Hey, that was amazing," one said. "You surprised everyone," another added with a small smile. She thanked them politely, though she didn't know how to fully respond. Compliments were still new to her. As she headed home, she held her notebook close to her chest. Every step felt meaningful, like she was walking into a new chapter of her life. She had played her heart out in front of everyone. She had faced her fear. She had shown them herself that her dream was never just a hobby, and deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The evening moved slowly, yet for her it felt like everything was happening too fast. After the performance earlier in the day, she could still hear the echoes of the room, people whispering, others staring, and some finally realizing she had something they never expected. She didn't let herself celebrate. Instead, she walked home quietly, trying to understand what had changed inside her. It was the first time she had seen people's assumptions about her shift in real time. And even though she tried to stay calm, her heart carried a strange mix of fear and excitement. At home, she placed her bag in the corner and sat near the old piano her family had kept for years. It wasn't polished or fancy. The paint had faded, and the keys had small cracks from years of use. But to her, it was still the most comforting place in the house. She ran her fingers across the keys without pressing anything, just feeling them. It made her think of how long she had been practicing alone, how many evenings she had spent trying to improve without anyone noticing. The moment felt heavy, but in a good way. She knew something had changed, not just in the room earlier, but within her. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't chasing a dream blindly. She had real proof, that what she had inside her wasn't just wishful thinking. She closed her eyes, letting her memories replay. She remembered how some students laughed when she said she liked playing piano. They called it a hobby and claimed she would never make anything from it. She didn't confront them because she believed time would speak louder than anything she could say. And earlier that day, it finally did, but now came the harder part, proving that it wasn't a one-time moment. She knew people could easily dismiss her again if she couldn't stay consistent. She wasn't looking to impress them. She just wanted to hold on to the feeling she experienced when the room went still after she played that one song. Her thoughts were interrupted when her younger sibling entered the room. They looked at her quietly, trying to understand what she was thinking. They had always been the first to listen whenever she practiced, even when her playing wasn't as smooth or strong. "You looked different today," the younger one said softly. She smiled. "Different? How?" "Like you finally believed in yourself." The words felt simple, but they hit deeply. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked down at her hands. They were still shaky from everything that happened. She wondered if people could really see that change from the outside, or if it was just something her sibling noticed, because they had watched her struggle for so long. After a moment, she replied, "I'm not sure what happened today. When I started playing, I forgot about everything else. It felt like the room disappeared." "That's what it looked like," the younger one said. Everyone could see it. Hearing that eased some of the pressure building inside her. Maybe she didn't imagine the silence in the room. Maybe people truly had felt it. Later that night, she practiced again, not because she had to, but because she wanted to hold on to the feeling. Her fingers moved slowly at first, replaying the same melody she had performed earlier. The sound filled the small room, soft but full of emotion. Her sibling sat nearby on the floor, listening quietly. When she finished, she leaned back, breathing deeply. "You should perform again," the younger one said. She shook her head. "I don't think I'm ready." "But you were ready today." She looked at them, but didn't answer. She wasn't afraid of playing in front of others. She was afraid of slipping back into the shadows after finally being seen. She didn't want her progress to disappear just because she doubted herself. The next morning, she went to school, expecting everything to feel the same. But as soon as she walked through the hallway, she noticed something different. People didn't ignore her like usual. Some looked over and whispered. Others gave small nods, the kind people give when they're unsure if they should approach. She kept moving, trying not to show that her heart was racing. But then something unexpected happened. One of the teachers who had been present during her performance the day before approached her. "I heard what you played yesterday," the teacher said. "It was impressive. Have you ever considered performing at the school event next month?" She froze. The school event was one of the largest gatherings of the year. Students, teachers, and even parents attended. It was a much bigger stage than anything she had ever imagined. I don't know," she admitted softly. "You should think about it," the teacher said. "You have something special. Don't let it stay hidden." The teacher walked away, leaving her standing there, unsure how to feel. She wasn't used to encouragement. It felt strange but warm, like something she had been missing for a long time. Throughout the day, She couldn't stop thinking about the invitation. Performing at that event meant stepping into a place where everyone would be watching. People who had never noticed her before. People who once doubted her. People who might still think she wasn't capable. That thought scared her, but it also pushed her. When she returned home, she told her sibling what happened. Their eyes widened immediately. "You have to do it," they said. She sat on the couch, thinking carefully. "What if I mess up? What if you don't?" The younger one replied. The question felt simple, but it held more weight than anything she had asked herself. She realized she had spent so long thinking of what could go wrong that she never allowed herself to imagine what could go right. Later that evening, she stood in front of the piano again. She didn't play at first. She just stood there, breathing slowly. Everything around her felt quiet. For the first time, she was not practicing for others or for approval. She was preparing for something that could shape her future. Finally, she sat down and placed her fingers on the keys. She took a deep breath and started playing. The sound filled the room again, strong and clear this time. Each note carried her fear, her hope, and her determination. She didn't know what the upcoming event would bring, but she knew one thing for sure. She wouldn't hide anymore. The world had finally heard her once. Now she would let them hear her again, this time louder, stronger, and without hesitation. The day of the event arrived faster than she expected. She had counted the days one by one, practicing every evening, repeating the same parts over and over until they felt natural. But even with all that preparation, she woke up with her stomach tied in a knot. The house felt extra quiet that morning, almost as if everyone sensed how important the day was. She dressed slowly, choosing something simple and comfortable. She didn't want to stand out because of her clothes. She wanted the music to speak, not anything else. When she walked into the kitchen, her younger sibling was already waiting for her with a small smile. "You're going to do great," they said. She smiled nervously. "I hope so." "You don't have to hope. You've already proved it." The words didn't make the fear disappear, but they softened it. She felt supported, and for the first time that morning, her heartbeat calmed a little. At school, the hallways were buzzing with energy. Students were running around, teachers were arranging decorations, and the stage team was testing the sound system. Everything felt chaotic, yet somehow organized. She watched from a distance, trying to gather courage. When a teacher saw her standing there quietly, they approached her with a warm smile. "You're here early." "That's good. It shows commitment." She nodded, though she wasn't sure if it was commitment or fear that brought her early. They guided her to the backstage area, where other performers were practicing. Some were adjusting microphones, others were stretching or rehearsing lines for their performances. She felt small among them, as if she didn't belong. But then she remembered how she felt when the room fell silent during her last performance. That memory was enough to steady her breathing. While waiting, she opened the small notebook she had been carrying for weeks. Inside were pages filled with notes, small reminders, and short lines she had written to motivate herself. One line stood out: "Play from the heart. Everything else will follow." She read it twice, then closed the notebook and held it close. As the start of the event approached, the audience began filling the seats. She could hear the echo of voices from outside the curtain, students chatting, parents settling in, teachers giving last-minute instructions. It felt unreal to think that soon she would be the one standing in front of all of them. Her hands trembled slightly as she waited, but she didn't try to hide it. Nervousness was normal. It meant she cared. Finally, her name was called. She stood up slowly, heart pounding, and walked toward the stage entrance. The lights were bright, almost blinding, but she kept her eyes on the piano. It looked polished and perfect, so different from the one at home. Yet she felt drawn to it instantly. As she walked to the bench, the audience quieted. She could feel hundreds of eyes watching her. Some recognized her from earlier performances. Others were seeing her for the first time. A few leaned forward with curiosity, while others looked skeptical. She didn't let any of it distract her. She took a deep breath and placed her hands on the keys. For a brief moment, everything went silent in her mind. The fear, the expectations, the whispers, they all faded. There was only the piano dot, and then she began to play. The first notes were soft, like a gentle whisper. She let them flow naturally, remembering the advice she had repeated to herself countless times: play with emotion, not pressure. As the melody grew stronger, her fingers moved with confidence. Each sound carried a piece of her journey. The room shifted. People leaned in, the way they did when something unexpected touched them. She didn't see their faces clearly, but she felt their attention. It gave her strength as the music filled the hall. She felt something she hadn't felt before, a deep connection to everyone listening. It wasn't about proving herself anymore. It was about sharing something meaningful, something that came from her heart. Her sibling, seated in one of the front rows, watched with bright eyes. They had always known she had talent, but now they were witnessing a moment that felt bigger than anything the two had experienced before. Halfway through the performance, she hit a part of the melody that had always challenged her. During practice, she had stumbled over it repeatedly. But today, something was different. Her hands didn't shake. Her mind didn't freeze. Instead, the music flowed smoothly. She played that section effortlessly, surprising herself. She felt a wave of emotion rise inside her, but she didn't let it break her focus. She let it guide her when she reached the final stretch of the piece. She slowed down, allowing each note to linger. The sound felt warm, comforting, almost like a voice telling everyone that dreams didn't have to stay hidden. And then, the last note echoed into silence. She sat there, hands still hovering above the keys, breathing deeply. The room was completely still. It was the same silence she had heard before, the kind that wasn't empty, but full of emotion. A moment passed, then another and suddenly the room erupted with applause. It wasn't forced or polite. It was real, genuine applause that came from people who felt something from her music. Some stood up, clapping with enthusiasm. Others smiled warmly, impressed by how much she had grown. The teacher who had encouraged her earlier stood with pride. Her sibling clapped the hardest, cheering with excitement. She felt her eyes water, but she held back the tears. Not because she wanted to be strong, but because she wanted to take in every second of the moment. As she walked off the stage, several students approached her. Some who had doubted her before looked at her with respect. A few even apologized softly for not believing in her earlier. She didn't hold any anger toward them. Instead, she felt grateful that they could see her differently now. The teacher approached her again. "You did more than perform," they said. "You inspired people today." She didn't know how to respond. She simply smiled and bowed her head slightly. Her sibling ran up and hugged her tightly. "I told you," they said. "You belong on that stage." For the first time, she fully believed it. Later that day, after the event ended and the crowd left the hall, she returned to the stage alone. The lights were dimmer, the chairs empty, and the space was quiet. She walked toward the piano and sat down again. She didn't play anything this time. She simply placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes. She thought about her journey, the doubt, the quiet practice sessions, the whispers, the challenges, and the moment she finally proved herself. She remembered how hard it had been to keep going at times. How many nights she wondered whether her dream was just a hobby. But now she knew the truth. It was never just a hobby. It was a part of her. And now, everyone had seen it. She took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She stood up, looked at the piano one last time, and walked away with a calm, confident smile. Her journey wasn't over. It was only beginning.